Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to the dirtiest, deadliest corners of medieval Europe, where you're about to become something ... special. A plague doctor. You've seen the mask, right? Long beak, round glass eyes, black robe, like something out of a gothic nightmare. Well, congratulations, yours now. You're officially the most feared, mistrusted, and overworked figure in a city where half the population might already be dead. The sun's barely up, but the bells are already tolling. Not for morning prayer, no, those are plague bells. You can hear them clanging from windows and alleyways, each ring announcing another home locked from the outside. Inside those homes, people too sick to scream. You clutch your newly issued gear in both hands, trying not to notice the dried something on the hem dot. First comes the mask. It's heavier than it looks, stuffed at the tip with dried herbs, rosemary, mint, marjoram, lavender, some medieval aromatherapy. Theory about sweet smells warding off bad air, miasma, they called it. Of course, now you know it was bacteria, not smells, that carried the plague. But here, in the 14th century, you'll take whatever you can get. The scent hits you fast, overpowering, sweet, and oddly putrid at the same time, like rotting. Oranges wrapped in sage. You slide the mask over your head. It's claustrophobic, steamy, and the vision through the rounded eye holes is painfully limited. Peripheral vision, gone. Hearing, muffled. You breathe through slits in the beak, which means you're re-inhaling your own warm, damp breath every few seconds. Hope you like feeling faint. Also, hope you're not claustrophobic. Too late if you are. Next, the robe. Waxed canvas, thick wool, or even oiled leather if you're lucky. Thick enough to protect you, sure, but it also traps every ounce of body. Heat, you could be trudging through snowdrifts or heat waves. Either way, the suit feels like an oven. Underneath, you're sweating buckets before you've even reached your first patient. There's no ventilation, no breaks, and definitely no laundry service. Historians still argue whether the beaked mask was widely used during the earliest plagues or became more iconic during later outbreaks, like the Black Death's return in the 1600s. Either way, the image has stuck, and now it's your face too. You glance into a piece of warped glass leaning against the apothecary's wall. Yup, terrifying. Your gloves are stitched tight at the wrists. The boots are tall, laced high, and stuffed with layers of rough linen. You're covered head to toe. That's supposed to protect you, but it also makes you look like something less than human. Children scream, dogs bark, grown men cross themselves when you walk by. Everyone assumes you're either here to save them, or to haul away their dead. Here's the twist though. That beaked mask you're wearing, it barely works. In fact, it may even trap the disease inside if you're not careful with removing it. Most of the time, you'll end the day coughing into the inside of your robes, unsure if it's from smoke, herbs, or the plague creeping up on you. One man on your route asks you, quite seriously, if the beak contains bird magic. Another suggests it makes you immune because it's shaped like a bird's nose, and birds don't get plague. This is the level of science we're dealing with. The locals aren't the only ones confused. You are, too. You've been given no real training, just a list of homes to visit and some vague advice about burning herbs and not touching anything. You've also been told helpfully that if you die, your replacement gets your outfit, so do try not to bleed on it too much. The city council handed you this job because no one else would take it. Real physicians, the ones who studied in universities, left weeks ago. The rich packed up their wagons and fled to the countryside. Even priests are keeping their distance. So guess what? You're now the last line of defense between the living and the dead. And that job description? It includes diagnosing people you've never met, convincing terrified families to hand over loved ones. And oh yes, writing death certificates. That's right, you're also the paperwork guy. In a full-body sauna suit, you finally step into your first street of the day. It's narrow, clogged with debris and mud, and it stinks of sewage. You try to walk briskly, but your boots are heavy and your breath keeps fogging the inside of your lenses. You nearly trip over a dead chicken. Or maybe it wasn't dead. Hard to tell. A young boy sees you and bolts behind a crate. A woman spits in your direction and mutters a prayer. A black cat follows you for half a block. You ignore all of it, and as you approach the first infected house, your heart does something. Or it tightens, sinks. Not from fear, from certainty, because deep down you know nothing you do today is going to save anyone. Not really, but still, you knock on the door. The door creaks open with a sound like a rusted hinge on a gallows. Behind it, a girl older than 10 peers up at you with red-rimmed eyes and tear-streaked cheeks. She doesn't flinch. She's seen the mask before, likely seen worse. You step inside. The air in the house is thick, warm, damp, and cloyingly sweet with the unmistakable rot of sickness, the smell of death in its earliest stage. You pull your robe tighter around your body, as if wool and waxed fabric will shield you from more than just fleas and flies. The room is dark. No one opens windows anymore, because open windows are thought to invite the plague. So everyone breathes the same fetid air, day after day, sealed in with the dying. You move slowly, carefully, your boots sticking slightly to the floor. The mask makes your every breath loud and slow. Darth Vader, but without the lasers or respect to your left. The father lies on a straw mattress, soaked through with sweat or maybe worse. His eyes are sunken, lips dry and cracked, breath rattling in his chest like wind through dead leaves. His fingertips are black. His groin and armpits are swollen with buboes the size of walnuts. You don't need a diagnosis chart. It's plague. Crouch beside him, the leather of your gloves squeaking slightly, and gently wave your wand-like staff across his chest. The stick is supposed to help you avoid touching people directly. It also occasionally helps you prod rats out of the way or point at body parts without actually leaning in. You murmur something vaguely medical sounding, mostly for the daughter's benefit. Outside, a cart trundles by, its wheels crunching, over something soft. A muffled voice calls out the usual, "Bring out your dead." The girl stares at the sound, then looks back at you with an expression halfway between pleading and resignation. She knows what comes next. You do what you can. You take notes, though your ink is drying out. Fast and dab a cloth with vinegar and herbs. You place it over the man's forehead, though whether to comfort or cleanse is debatable. A few decades from now, people will realize that vinegar does little against Yersinia pestis. But for now, it's what you've got. Your second patient is in the next room. The mother, already gone. You check her pulse through the fabric of your glove, which is about as accurate as checking it through a boot. Still, it's clear, she's cold. Rigor has begun to set in. You add a note to your ledger. One mainstream fact. During the height of the Black Death in the 14th century, it's estimated that some cities lost over 60% of their populations. Entire streets emptied, guilds shut down, markets collapsed. You Walk through one of those streets now, stepping over discarded shoes and a broken rosary. The air outside offers no relief, only more silence, broken by sobs and distant coughing. As you walk, you notice another man peering out through a cracked shutter. He looks healthy. You mark his house anyway. Early signs can be subtle, and it's better to keep watch lists now than regret later. Some plague doctors took to marking homes with chalk white for exposure, red for death. You've got a pouch of both in your satchel, along with a handful of posies. Because, yes, people genuinely believed that carrying sweet-smelling flowers might keep the plague at bay. Hence, the old rhyme, ring round the rosy. You check your staff again. No blood on it yet, that's good. Blood can get messy, especially when your tools are so medieval. Speaking of tools, let's talk about your medical arsenal. You carry a scalpel that's never been properly sharpened, a bottle of thick treacle that was prepared about 6 summers ago, and a live chicken. No, seriously, a live chicken. One fringe method involved strapping a plucked chicken still warm, mind you, against a patient's plague bubo. The idea was that the disease would transfer into the chicken, and when the chicken died, you got a new one and started again. You tried it once. Once the chicken didn't enjoy it. Neither did the patient. The results were exactly what you'd expect. One dead bird and a very annoyed family. You still have a scratch across your wrist from where the creature lashed out. But hey, superstition is 9/10 of your job. You keep a few other curiosities in your bag, including dried toad skin, powdered unicorn horn, spoiler, it's just narwhal tusk, and a tin of mercury salve. You've never used the mercury, mostly because you enjoy having hands. Historians still debate whether plague doctors truly believed in these cures, or simply performed them to comfort the sick. Some argue it was theatre, a performance of care, rather than true healing. After all, when the mortality rate is 70%, even hope is medicinal. You finish your rounds just past noon, though time doesn't really exist in plague work. The bells toll every hour, but your day is measured in doors knocked, bodies found, and homes marked. As you return to your quarters, a small room near the city edged, you strip your gloves and hang your robe by the fire. The mask you leave on the windowsill, the beak pointing out toward the darkening alley, maybe to scare off rats, maybe to keep your dreams tame. You sit, your legs ache, your lungs are tired from breathing through lavender-soaked rags, and your stomach, it's not hungry. It hasn't been for days. Outside, another cart rolls past, and this time you notice something new. It's heavier. You don't sleep well. No plague doctor does. When you finally close your eyes, the dreams that come are a jumbled collage of swollen limbs, vacant eyes, and rooms too silent to be anything but death-filled. The smell stays in your nostrils, even hours later, and rosemary, sweat, and smoke. You wake just before dawn with a start, damp with sweat beneath layers of linen, and for a moment you forget where or when you are, but there's no time for panic. The day starts early for someone in your line of work, and it's time to suit up again. Your robe is stiff with yesterday's grime. The gloves still carry a faint, unpleasant tackiness, and the mask, you try not to think about what might have settled in the beak overnight. The truth is, you're not even a real doctor. Most plague doctors weren't. Some were barbers, failed surgeons, monks who read a few anatomy scrolls. You fixed wagon wheels for a living before this. Then one day, a city official came knocking, holding a contract with a fat payment and only one clause: stay until the plague ends. You were hungry, you signed. This wasn't uncommon. Medieval cities were desperate. Infected towns would hire anyone even vaguely medical to serve as their plague doctor. One poor man in Marseille in 1720 got the job because he was literate and owned a feathered quill. Another was chosen in Lubeck because he'd once drained a boil with a fishing knife. Congratulations, you're now the city's front line. You step into the street. This time, you're headed for the artisan quarter, once filled with potters, weavers, cobblers, now mostly silence. The clay wheels have stopped spinning, the looms are still. What's left are the people too poor to flee, too sick to work, and too desperate to stay quiet. At one door, you're greeted by shouting. The moment they see your mask, a woman screams through the window, "Go away. We prayed, we cleansed. It's the will of God, not you." You try to speak, but your voice comes out muffled and eerie through the mask. You sound less like a man and more like a crow that studied Latin. She throws something, maybe a pewter cup, and it clangs off the side of your shoulder. Doesn't hurt, thanks to the padding. Still, it stings in a different way. You're not here to hurt them, but you are the reminder that death might already be inside. By midday, you've visited 4 more homes. One patient has a mild cough and insists it's just from the chimney soot. Another is covered in buboes and raves about snakes in the walls. You mark both doors. You've learned to treat madness as a symptom, to dot, and then, in one narrow alley, you meet a monk. Or rather, he meets you. He appears from a side door, robes billowing like he's been waiting for this moment his entire life. Plague comes. From sin, he shouts, pointing dramatically at you. And you are its instrument. You try to explain that no, actually, you're here to stop it, not spread it but again. The mask doesn't exactly make you sound like the voice of reason. He throws holy water at your boots and disappears back into the shadows. There's something ironic about being seen as both the healer and the cause. But then, that's how it often was. Plague doctors were feared as omens, walking symbols that your neighborhood was no longer safe. Children would hide. Some would throw stones. Many believed that you brought the disease with you, because wherever you showed up, people soon died. And sometimes they weren't wrong. Because here's the real secret: your presence doesn't always help. Sometimes people seem healthier before your visit. Sometimes they get worse after. And while part of you wants to believe that's just the disease's course, part of you wonders if your gloves are truly clean, if your robes still carry yesterday's plague, if the mask is more costume than cure. You visit a man named Tom, mid-40s, a butcher. His hands shake when he opens the door. He has the early signs: swollen nodes, tired eyes, a tremor in his voice. He asks if it's bad. You pause longer than you should. You tell him the truth. He nods, then quietly asks if he should send his wife away or let her stay and hold his hand. You don't have an answer for that. You never do. Mainstream fact: most plague doctors weren't allowed to treat people in the upper class. Nobles and the wealthy had their own physicians, private ones, trained in universities, who charged 10 times what you make in a year. Your patients are the city's backbone: the butchers, the bakers, the cloth dyers and ale sellers, the people no one writes about, the ones you try to keep alive, one clove of garlic and vinegar wipe at a time, one fringe tidbit, some plague. Doctors swore by sapphire powder, literally powdered gems ground into pasta as a treatment. Not because it worked, but because blue was thought to cool the humors. You keep a little sapphire-colored bead in your satchel. It's glass. You tell patients it's rare. Historians still argue whether the plague doctors themselves truly believed in these remedies, or whether they simply went through the motions out of obligation, fear, or quiet desperation. Maybe they believed enough to sleep. Or maybe, like you, they kept going because someone had to. Evening comes, and the bells ring again. You've made your rounds. You've seen 9 patients today. 3 are improving, or at least pretending. 2 are already gone. 4 more are waiting to see if their fevers break overnight. You're not hopeful back in your room. You sit on the edge of the bed and remove the mask. Your face is damp and marked where the straps have pressed too tight. You close your eyes and hear coughing, echoing down the alley. You don't know if it's coming from someone, or for you. Morning again, or something like it. You wake to the sound of church bells tolling, but not for mass. These are death bells, funereal, heavy, and too frequent to be comforting. Somewhere beyond the shuttered window, a choir of crows caws over the rooftops. You dress in silence, the routine now carved into your muscles like a ritual. Undergarments first, then the linen, then the thick waxed robe. Gloves, boots, mask, the whole dreadful costume. You check your satchel. Still there, the stick, the herbs, the notes from yesterday. A small biscuit, dry and flaking. You eat it in silence. No appetite, but it's easier than fainting halfway through. A visit. Today begins with a home near the fishmonger's quarter, though fish no longer seems an accurate term for the smell wafting off the canal nearby. The plague hasn't only rotted people, it's rotting the very rhythm of the city. No one trades, no one sings. No one even argues in the market anymore. You knock on the door, nothing. You knock again, this time harder, with the butt of your staff. Finally, a voice croaks. He's dead. You push the door open. It groans like it hasn't moved in years, and inside, the air is thick. Not the stench of the freshly dead. No, this is older, the kind of smell that seems to slink into your lungs and stay there, like a squatter. The man is slumped in a chair. His skin is a greyish hue, tight over his bones, with the faint shimmer of dried sweat on his temples. No blood, no signs of struggle. He looks at peace, oddly enough. That's rare. Most go out screaming, praying, or choking. His wife is the one who answered. She's not crying. Her hands are folded in her lap, stiff and unmoving. You approach her gently, the stick held outward. She flinches. Did you touch him after he died? You ask through the mask. She shakes her head. Then, after a pause, only to close his eyes. You make a note. Not that it'll change anything, but it makes the act feel official. You check her for signs. Pale, thin, but no buboes. Yet you offer a cloth soaked in vinegar. She takes it and holds it to her face, breathing it in like it's a flower. Out on the street, the death cart passes again. They pause outside the door, and you signal for them to wait. You step back inside, find a sheet, and wrap the man's body yourself. Your gloves stick to the fabric in places. You try not to let your hands shake, and just as you start to lift him, you hear it, a quiet sob from behind you. The wife, she's breaking now. You pause, and for the first time all day, you say something kind, not scientific, not part of protocol, just kind. She doesn't answer, but she nods. Mainstream fact: during the Black Death, people often died within 3 to 5 days of their first symptom. The progress was brutal, swift, and merciless. You've seen patients go from alert to unconscious in the span of a meal. You've also seen the opposite, those rare few who recover, who cough and tremble and live. But those stories are fewer. Your next visit is not far a home that was already marked last week. You remember it, the old weaver with the bird cage. When you arrive, the cage is still there, but the bird is gone. You knock. This time, a boy answers. I thought you weren't coming back, he says, his voice small and hoarse. My sister has the lumps now too. You step inside. The weaver is gone, wrapped in linen and already collected, the boy says. He and his sister are alone now. She's lying on the floor, no mattress left, sold it, likely. Her forehead is slick, her eyes glazed. She tries to smile at you, but her lips don't move quite right. You ask if they've eaten. The boy shrugs. There's turnip broth. You find the pot. It's mostly water, with a few floating shreds of vegetable. You sit with them a while, longer than usual. You clean her wounds. You leave a second cloth soaked in wine. And you give them the biscuit you didn't eat this morning. Fringe tidbit. Some plague doctors carried lucky charms sewn into the linings of their robes, scraps of scripture, bones of saints, or small wooden amulets believed to ward off illness. You've thought about adding one, but can't decide which god to offend by choosing the wrong one. Historians still argue whether plague doctors truly served as doctors, or if they were simply state officials, a cross between coroner, notary, and death scribe. You feel like all of those things, and none of them. You're not here to cure. You're here to confirm, record, and if you're lucky, comfort. You exit the house just as the boy begins to hum to his sister. A lullaby maybe, or something. He's making up. The tune sticks with you all the way to your next stop. This one isn't a hommet, a monastery. You weren't expecting to be summoned here, but a note was slipped under your door that morning. 3 ill, 1 already passed. Come quickly, the monks greet you at the gate. Not with smiles or bows, but with wary eyes. You're not exactly welcome. They usher you in without speaking. Inside, the halls are clean, almost unnervingly so. You wonder if incense and scrubbing are their only defense. One of the sick is an old brother with parchment-stained fingers. He murmurs about sins and fire. The second is younger, but worse, off his eyes red, blood-tinged saliva clinging to his lips. The third is already being buried in the cloister garden. You do what you can, which isn't much. You leave the monastery just before sundown. Behind you, a bell tolls once not for you, but for the one already buried. You wonder, as you walk, if your own bell will sound like that. You don't go home tonight. There's no point. You're needed to urgently, and the sky's already thick with smoke and dusk. So instead, you spend the night in a church cellar, tucked beneath the stone vaults of St. Bartholomew's. The priest, taller than the stained glass, waves you in without a word. He doesn't shake your hand, doesn't even meet your eyes, just points to a straw mat and a chipped clay jug of water. You thank him, voice muffled through your mask, and he mutters a quick blessing without looking back. You lie down, still wearing most of your outfit. Removing the robe would be like peeling off your own skin, dangerous and sticky. The mask rests beside you, the beak casting a long shadow across the cellar wall like a vulture waiting for sleep to stop pretending it matters. You stare at the ceiling for hours. In the quiet, your mind drifts back to your first week on the job. You had no idea what to expect. The dead, yes, the dying, of course, but the tools you were given was something else entirely. Take the plague stick, for example. You still carry it, practically your badge of office. A yard long, rod of polished wood, sometimes tipped with metal. The idea was that you could examine patients without touching them. It's become your favorite tool, mostly because it lets you pretend you're doing something useful without needing to get too close. You've used it to point, to prod, to press open eyelids. You've used it to knock on doors, to fend off angry dogs, and once to rescue a toddler from a rat-infested stairwell. You've even used it to test bodies because, it turns out, a stiff poke can tell you more than a half-educated guess. And yet, there's a kind of absurdity to it. This dainty little wand carried through a storm of contagion and chaos, as if you're performing some delicate dance. One monk last week called it your death baton. He wasn't wrong, but the tools only get stranger. Let's talk about the herbs. Oh, the herbs. You've carried enough mint, lavender, and rosemary to start your own plague-themed apothecary. They're stuffed into your mask, tied in cloth bundles at your belt, and scattered around your sleeping quarters like a florist's graveyard. The theory, these aromatic bundles, posies, were supposed to purify the air, to fight off the miasma, the bad air blamed for spreading plague. It's why people walked around clutching little flower bunches to their noses. You once saw a man collapse in the street and drop his posy, and 3 others bolted from him, faster than if he'd drawn a sword. It was charming in a dark way. Of course, now you know, it wasn't the air. It was the fleas. Rats, fleas, and a tiny microbe that no one in your century has even imagined. But that doesn't stop people from baking herbs into their bread, burning them in little brass pots, or stuffing them in every crevice of your mask. Fringe. Practice burning sulfur in your patient's home, supposed to smoke out the disease. You tried that once, nearly suffocated an old woman and yourself. Took 3 days to get the stench out of your gloves. Never again. You've also got dried rose petals in a leather pouch, ground into powder. Someone told you once to blow them across a sick bed while reciting Psalm 91. You did. No one got better, but it felt intentional. Then there are the vials. You carry a few: vinegar of the 4 thieves, oil of wormwood, a cloudy tonic made of boiled onions and beer. None of it works, but you administer them all the same because people expect something. Expect hope. The vinegar is your most common standby. Legend says it was used by a band of thieves who robbed plague victims and never got sick. Did it work? Probably not, but it's cheaper than unicorn powder and doesn't involve slaughtering a goat. So, it's what you bring. Mainstream fact. Vinegar of the 4 thieves is real. Recipes varied, but it usually included herbs like sage, thyme, lavender, and cloves soaked in strong vinegar and dabbed on pulse points or poured round rooms. People clung to it like holy water. In the corner of the cellar, a rat scuttles across a beam. You don't move. You're too tired to be disgusted. You simply listen. The scratch of its claws on stone. The quiet drip of moisture somewhere behind. The altar. And above all, the wheezing of your own breath, slow and steady. Historians still argue whether plague doctors truly believed in their arsenal or simply used it as theatre to reassure the public or themselves. Were they healers or hope merchants? Maybe both, maybe neither. You wake with a jolt, ensure if you ever truly slept, and gather your things. Your next task, a mass inspection. A city official knocks at the church door just after sunrise. He doesn't enter, just thrusts a scroll in your direction. A list of homes, 27 addresses, all suspected cases. He doesn't wait for a reply, just turns and disappears into the mist. You sigh. The list feels heavier than the staff in your hand. Your first stop is a tenement near the tanner's yard. The smell of hide and lime is sharp in your throat. Inside, 5 people crammed into 2 rooms. A mother, 2 boys, an uncle, and a grandmother who hasn't moved in a day. Her lips are blue. She's still breathing. Barely you mark the door. A red cross this time, and the date. You move on. The next home is empty, completely. Not a body, not a rat. Just silence and a single spoon on the floor. You wonder what it means. You wonder if they fled. You wonder if they made it. You move on. The home after that collapsed. Fire. No one survived. You mark it anyway. By the time you reach the 7th door, your hand is shaking. Not from fatigue, from something deeper. You wonder if the tools you carry, your mask, your herbs, your stick, are just symbols, tokens in a pageant of futility. But still, you knock, because even if nothing works, you show up. And for some, that still matters. It's raining. The kind of soft, ceaseless drizzle that turns roads into rivers of mud and regret. Water drips from the tip of your mask's beak, rolling down the waxed robe in steady rivulets. Everything smells like wet wool and damp ash. Your boots squelch with every step, suctioning into the muck and groaning with release. You've already slipped twice. You arrive at the gates of a large Hausa merchant's estate. Not one of the rich merchants, mind you. The truly wealthy left weeks ago, taking their money, their doctors, and most of their furniture. What's left behind are the nearly rich, folks who thought they could outwait the plague by sheer optimism and strong tea. This particular merchant summoned you via a servant now missing. The door is locked. You knock with your staff. No answer. You knock again, louder. A voice finally calls from inside, frail, suspicious. You're not surprised. I've already been bled, it says. I've had cloves in my bath and sage. In my nose, go away. You sigh, politely. You shout back, I'm the doctor. A long pause. Then the door creaks open just wide enough to admit a black figure with a beaked mask. You glide in like a funerary ghost, dripping onto the tiled floor. The merchant peers from behind a curtain, eyes darting over your suit like you might be contagious just from existing. You assure him you're here to help. You begin your inspection. The man isn't well, shivering, sweating, muttering about his accounts. His wife lies curled in a bed across the room, unmoving. Their daughter is the only one coherent, and even she's coughing between prayers. You examine the mother buboes. You press gently. The fluid bursts from one, and you try not to gag through the lavender in your mask. The daughter sobs. You offer her a cloth. She presses it to her eyes. You pretend it might help. Mainstream fact, bleeding, purging, and bathing in scented water were among the most commonly prescribed plague treatments in medieval Europe. Physicians, real or otherwise, relied heavily on the idea of balancing the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black bile, too much of any one. Time to cut a vein. You've seen bloodletting done with leeches, knives, sharpened quills, even teeth, in one memorable and extremely misguided case. Sometimes the bleeding works, not because it cures the patient, but because it leaves them too weak to argue. You carry your own kit, of course, small blades, a few bandages, and a cloth you wash far less often than you should. You've used it twice today already, and the stains haven't dried yet. The merchant wants to be bled again. You hesitate, then comply. He says it helps with the headaches. Whether it's the placebo effect or the slow approach of death is unclear. The wife dies an hour later. You help the daughter wrap her in a blanket. The merchant doesn't look, just keeps mumbling about ships that will never arrive. You note that death, sign it. Stamp it with a wax seal you keep for just this purpose. It's strange how official death feels when pressed with hot wax and a bit of thread. You leave the house. Behind you, the daughter calls out, "Will she come back?" You pause, then say, "No, but you might live." She doesn't answer. You don't blame her. Your next stop is a hospice. Hospices were meant to care for the poor, the orphaned, the old. But now they've become makeshift wardrobes of straw mattresses, shoulder to shoulder, each one holding someone at the edge of life. Inside, it's chaos muted by exhaustion. A nun nods at you as you enter. She's wearing no mask, just a cloth wrapped around her face, and a crucifix so worn it's more metal than symbol. She asks you to check a boy in the far corner. You find him sweating under a heavy wool blanket. He looks barely 7. His breaths come fast. You kneel, try to speak softly. He mumbles about a dog with no legs, a cloud that looked like his mother. Then, nothing. You leave the boy and check the others. 4 in a row, 1 dead, 1 dying, 2 clinging, barely. You offer vinegar cloths, lavender, a spoonful of wine steeped with thyme. It doesn't matter, but it feels like action. And sometimes, that's enough. 1 fringe tidbit. In some towns, people believed that burying the dead with roasted onions could prevent the plague from returning. A handful of gravediggers swore by it. You once found an entire cemetery lined with them withered, brown bulbs, half-eaten by rats. It didn't work, obviously, but it smelled better than the bodies. Historians still argue whether hospices were places of genuine healing or simply well-meaning warehouses for the dying. Some were run with incredible care, others were thinly disguised mass graves with blankets. This one falls somewhere in between as you make your rounds. You notice something that tightens your chest. A man in the corner, curled under a cloak that looks just like yours. You walk closer. He's not a doctor. He's a former doctor, or tried to be. He wears only part of the outfit. The mask is gone. His gloves are soaked through, and his eyes are red, lips dry. He sees you and smiles vaguely. "You're late," he whispers. You crouch. He's burning with fever, delirious. He reaches for your hand. You offer it, carefully, letting him touch only your gloved fingers. "I tried," he mumbles. "Did all the right things, all the right smells, herbs, staff, prayers." You nod, because there's nothing else to say. He dies before sundown. You take his robe, burn it in the alley. No one comes to ask his name. By the time you return to your lodging, more storage closet than home, the rain has stopped. But everything is still wet, including you. You peel off your gloves. Your fingers are pale, wrinkled, and raw. One has split near the nail. You pour vinegar over it. It stings like fire. You sit down, exhale, and somewhere, not far off, a dog howls. Your fingers are swollen by morning, blistered at the joints, sore in the knuckles. You flex them slowly, watching the skin crease like wet parchment. You tell yourself it's just irritation, friction from the gloves, a bit of inflammation from all that vinegar. Nothing to worry about. Except, of course, that's exactly what everyone says before the black spots appear. You pack your things anyway. The same herbs, the same notes, the same mask, which now smells permanently of rosemary and something faintly like mouse droppings. You keep your movements slow, deliberate, no sudden shifts. You're listening carefully to your own body now. The first stop today is the jail. You've been summoned by a city constable. He's convinced an outbreak has begun among the prisoners. The jail is built into the base of an old monastery, all stone and iron and shouting. You're met at the entrance by a guard holding a torch, even though it's broad daylight. "Don't get too close," he says. You almost laugh. You're the only one in this entire district whose job is to get too close. He leads you down a flight of slick stone steps, the kind worn smooth by time and bodily fluids. The stink hits you before the bottom: sweat, rot, damp straw, and something worse, fear. There are 8 cells, all occupied, some with 2 or 3 men, most of them coughing. One prisoner sits pressed against the wall, mumbling prayers. Another claws at his shirt, trying to dig at something beneath his skin. The constable explains that he thought they were faking it at first, but now the fever's too real. You nod, though the thought has crossed your mind too. Jails and plague make for a very particular kind of panic. People will fake sickness for leniency or hide it to avoid execution. The trick is figuring out which kind you're dealing with before anyone dies. You crouch at the bars. One man has swelling behind his ears. Another is bleeding from his gums. You flinch slightly at that, not because it's rare, but because it's messy. You make a note. You recommend immediate quarantine, though you know the jail has no extra space. The constable curses. You suggest opening the unused tower for overflow. He laughs until he realizes you're serious. Then he nods grimly. Mainstream fact: medieval prisons were often plague hotspots, particularly during the 14th and 15th centuries. Overcrowding, poor sanitation, and a complete lack of medical oversight made them the perfect breeding grounds for disease. In London's Newgate prison, entire cell blocks were wiped out in a matter of days. During the Great Plague of 1665, you check the rest of the prisoners quickly. One begs you to tell his wife he's still alive. Another offers you gold if you say he's dead and let him escape. You refuse both, quietly. You're here to record, not to rescue. As you leave, the constable stops you. What should we do? With the bodies, you raise an eyebrow. Bodies, he swallows. There were 2 yesterday. We burned them. Behind the kitchen, you nod. Not because it's the right thing, but because it's the only thing. Your next visit is to the gravediggers. They've been requesting official inspection after rumors started, spreading about their carts carrying more than just corpses. You arrive at the edge of the burial field, a low, foggy stretch of ground that might have once been farmland. Now it's just soil and silence, occasionally broken by the grunt of a shovel. The man in charge, Marcus, is a wiry fellow with a voice like gravel and fingers permanently blackened from digging. He nods at you as you approach, then gestures to the row of carts. "They said I was putting living men in the pits," he says. "I told M, we don't bury unless you or the priest says so." You inspect the cart. 5 bodies, 1 child. No signs of breath, no twitching, but one has eyes that aren't fully closed. You reach with your stick and press lightly on his shoulder. No response. You exhale. "Sometimes they twitch," Marcus adds. Gas in the gut scares the lads. You believe him. You want to believe him. Still, you lean in a little closer. The mask lenses fog slightly. The man's lips part. You jump back, but no, it's nothing. Just air escaping. His chest deflates faintly, and that's all. You write his name on your ledger. Then Marcus's, then mark the location of the grave. The church insists on records, not for the sake of the dead, but for the land. You can't have bodies turning up later when someone wants to plant beans. Fringe tidbit. Some towns believed that if you buried a plague victim without silver coins on their eyes, their spirit would wander, infecting others. Marcus, it turns out, keeps a pouch of tin buttons just in case. You say nothing. Everyone has their rituals. Historians still argue whether the gravediggers were heroes, criminals, or opportunists. The truth, like most things, is probably somewhere in the middle. They handled the worst of the worst with bare hands and bandaged mouths. Some took bribes. Others just broke under the pressure. But without them, the cities would have drowned in their own dead. You leave the burial field just as the fog lifts. The ground behind you is a patchwork of fresh mounds. No markers, no names. You check your hands again. Still swollen, still sore. But no black spots. Yet, you head back toward the central quarter. Along the way, you're stopped by a group of children, dirty, thin, and barefoot. They don't scream or flee. They stare. One points to your beaked mask. Are you deaf? You crouch slightly, shake your head. No. Another chimes in. Then why do people die after you come? You think for a moment, then say, because they were dying before I got there. They don't understand, but they nod like they do. One offers you a dandelion. You take it, not because it helps, but because it's something. The dandelion sits in your satchel now, a little yellow smear of defiance pressed between 2 pages of your notebook, right beside the list of names from the jail and burial fields. It's already wilting, but you keep it anyway. Maybe to remind yourself that something can grow, even in a city built out of loss. Your legs ache as you walk. Each step feels heavier than the last, like your boots have filled with sand. Not from exhaustion alone, there's something deeper, something slow and cold and unfamiliar in your bones. You push the thought aside. You're just tired, that's all. The sun is weak overhead, struggling behind clouds like it's afraid to shine. On this place, you trudge toward the riverbank. Another summons, another case. This one's different though. It's not a home, not a hospice, not a jail. It's a barber's shop, the kind of narrow little storefront you normally wouldn't visit unless your beard got caught in your soup. But today, you're called not as a patient, but as a witness. You arrive to find a small crowd. Outside, not many. No one gathers much anymore, unless something has either exploded, caught fire, or started twitching. The shop door is open. Inside, the barber, a thick-armed man with trembling hands, greets you like you're the Pope. He's pale. His apron is stained with something that might be blood or wine or soup. He gestures inside. It's in the chair. You step forward, mask fogging slightly. Sure enough, there's a man slumped in the barber's chair. Limp head, tilted to the side, jaw slack. His skin is waxy. A faint purpling creeps along his neck. He's clearly dead. The odd part is how he died. No signs, the barber says. He walked in fine, asked for a trim, just fell forward, gone. You inspect the body. No buboes, No fever sweat, no sores or bruising. The man looks peaceful, in a way, like he simply forgot to keep breathing. You glance at his hands, fingernails faintly blue, lips pale, maybe a heart failure, maybe a stroke, or maybe something else. You lean close, use your staff to tip his head back gently. That's when you see it, a single black spot hidden under his jawline, tiny like a pinprick of ink. But you've seen it before. You sigh. He didn't mention feeling ill. You ask, the barber shakes his head. Nothing, said he'd just come from the river. That makes you pause. Mainstream fact, rats and fleas weren't the only vectors for plague. Contaminated water sources, especially those downstream of burial grounds or poor neighborhoods, could carry infection, especially when bodies were disposed of improperly. In some cities, plague corpses were dumped in rivers during peak waves, leading to horrific secondary outbreaks. You asked the barber where, exactly, this man had come from. He gestures toward the West Bridjan area recently flooded, where several lower-class families have been burning their waste out of sheer desperation. You thank him, record the address, suggest he burn the chair. He doesn't argue. Your next stop is the West Bridge. It takes nearly an hour to walk there. The roads, a mixture of drying sludge and people who have lost their sense of destination. When you arrive, you find what you feared: water, dark and still, pooled beneath the bridge. At least 2 carcasses and more, maybe human float, half submerged. A child squats nearby, playing with a stick. You call to her gently. She looks up, startled. You live nearby. You ask. She nods, points to a cluster of homes upstream. Her nose is running, her eyes red. She smiles at you, small and trusting. You don't know what to say. You mark the location, make a note to speak with the bailiff. Not that they'll act quickly. Bureaucracy moves slower than plague. As you turn to leave, you slip on a stone and nearly fall. Your knee strikes the ground, and pain flares up your leg. You groan, then stand quickly, as if hoping no one noticed. But the child is still watching. She waves, you wave back. Later, back in your quarters, you peel off the robe slowly. It clings to you, damp, heavier than ever. Your gloves come off next. Your fingers are red, raw, trembling. And then you see it. A spot, just one, small, black, sitting on the inside of your wrist, right above the vein. You stare at it. Maybe it's ink. You hope it's ink. You rub at it. It stays. You tell yourself it's nothing. Fringe tidbit. Some doctors in Italy once believed that early plague symptoms could be staved off by cutting the black spot open and bleeding it directly. You consider it, just for a moment, but your hands are shaking too badly to hold the knife steady. Historians still argue whether plague doctors became infected more often because of their exposure, whether their stress, poor sleep, and psychological weight wore their immune systems down. You don't need a scholar to explain it. You feel it in your bones. The kind of fatigue that seeps deep, past your ribs, into your marrow. You bind your wrist tightly, make no note of it. Not yet. Instead, you do something strange. You light a candle, a small one, just wax and wick, and you place it near the dandelion in your notebook. Then you sit, and for the first time in days, you allow yourself 5 minutes of stillness. Just 5, because tomorrow, there will be another knock. The knock comes sooner than you expect, not at dawn, not with bells, just a soft rap at your door while the sky outside still clings to its last stars. You jolt upright, hand flying to your mask out of reflex. The candle is still burning, barely. The room smells of old smoke, vinegar, and your own rising fear. You don't answer immediately. You check your wrist again. The spot is still there, still. Small dot, still black. You bind it tighter and move to the door. When you open it, the figure outside startles you not because he's sick, but because he's clean. A tall man in a dark coat, pale face, hair neatly combed. He speaks with a clipped accent. Not local, you are the plague doctor. He asks. You nod. My employer requires your services. Discretion is expected. Payment generous. You raise an eyebrow behind your mask. How generous. He hands you a purse. Heavy. Too heavy for copper. You glance inside. Silver, real, not clipped, not hollowed. Enough to buy a new robe. Maybe even a horse. You agree without asking who the employer is. You've learned not to question money that shows up before sunrise. He leads you through back alleys and narrow lanes. The ones with no names, past walls where paint has peeled away to reveal older stone beneath. The city feels different here, still, quiet, like it's holding its breath. Eventually, you arrive at a gate, high, wrought iron. Beyond it, a manor house larger than most, but discreet. No flamboyant trim, no statues, just wealth, sitting, quietly, pretending not to exist. You're ushered inside without fanfare, no servants, no chatter, just the sound of wind brushing through ivy. The man leads you up to flights of stairs, then into a room lit only by 2 candles. The air smells different, less like rot, more like honey, herbs, and something faintly metallic. A woman lies on a bed near the window. Her skin is pale, but not sickly. Her eyes closed, lashes fluttering faintly. She's beautiful in the way. Sculptures are motionless, perfect, unreal. Her hands rest on her chest. This is Lady Eveline, the man says. She has been asleep. For 2 days, no fever, no spots, but she will not wake. You step closer, examining her. Breath is shallow. Pulse faint but regular. No visible swelling. You touch her forehead. Cool. Was she exposed? The man doesn't answer. You glance at the desk in the corner. A small pile of correspondences sealed, others hastily opened. One letter catches your eye, thick vellum, ornate lettering, the crest of a distant city. You don't read it. You don't need to. She traveled recently. You ask. The man's jaw tightens. Then, from Florence. She returned last week. You nod slowly. Florence has been burning for months now. You heard the rumors carts set ablaze to destroy the infected dead. River crossings barricaded. Entire districts sealed. And yet, Lady Eveline came home, unchecked. Unseen dot, you begin your examination. Mainstream fact, many aristocrats during plague outbreaks bribed officials, bypassed quarantine laws, or fled across borders entirely. The result? Disease carried like a secret under velvet sleeves and into towns thought safe. Some historians believe the second wave of the Black Death in Paris began with one such noble wedding caravan. You check her tongue, pale eyes, unfocused, but no hemorrhage, no stiffness. You press gently on her abdomen, noting the slow resistance. No sign of decay. Not yet. Have you tried leeches? You ask, half sarcastic. She refuses. The man says quietly, even in sleep. You pause. What? She refuses. When we approach with needles, Her hands move. When we burn incense, she turns her face. You stare at him. That's odd, fringe tidbit. There were rare accounts in Plague, chronicles of people entering a state called the living silence, a mysterious sleep from which they would not awaken, but in which they continued to breathe, twitch, and sometimes even weep. Some claimed it was divine punishment. Others called it a trick of the blood. No one agreed. You consider your options. You could bleed her. You could dose her with rosemary wine. You could whisper a psalm and hope. But instead, you speak to her. Lady Eveline, you say softly, if you can hear me, I need you to wake up. No response. You lean closer. The plague is here. Her eyes flicker, not open, but a twitch, unmistakable. She heard me. You whisper. The man's face pales. You reach out, slowly, take her hand. It's warmer than before. You speak again low, steady, as if talking to a frightened animal. You're safe, for now, but you have to wake before it finds you. Her lips twitch, just barely dot, then nothing. The man leads you out. You will return, he asks. Yes, you say, though you're not sure why. Burn rosemary by her bed. Keep the windows open. No leeches. Not yet. He nods, and you leave the manor. The silver still heavy in your satchel, and your thoughts even heavier as you walk back through the city. You pass a procession, not of mourners, of flagellants. Barefoot, shirtless, backs streaked with blood. They chant in Latin and strike themselves with ropes as they march. Onlookers cross themselves. Others stare in silence. They believe the plague is punishment, that suffering will earn forgiveness. You watch one man fall to his knees, sobbing into the cobblestones. Another collapses entirely. No one helps him. You keep walking. Historians still argue whether flagellant movements helped calm communities or stirred them further into panic. Some cities welcomed them, others expelled them. You've seen both. You've seen them inspire hope, and you've seen them beat a man to death for sneezing in the wrong direction. You return home late, too late. Your body aches. Your wrist throbs beneath its bandage. You unwrap it slowly. The spot is unchanged, still, small, still black. But now there are two. The weight of those two spots on your wrist is heavier than the purse, full of silver you carried yesterday. You trace their dark circles with a trembling finger, wondering if they are a sign or just ink left from a careless scribble. But deep down, you know the truth. You've started seeing the signs in your reflection now. Your eyes look darker, hollow. You catch yourself blinking more often, as if trying to clear a fog that isn't there. Your throat itches, a dry scratch that wakes you up in the middle of the night. But you have work to do. The city's chaos doesn't pause for your symptoms. In fact, it feels like it's speeding up. Bodies pile up faster than carts can carry them away. Rumors swirl louder. Fear festers like an open wound. Your next assignment comes with no fanfare. A letter tied with red wax, slipped under your door in the dead of night. It's from the city magistrate. It demands you attend the Royal Hospital. You know the place well. A sprawling complex with high stone walls, where the sick, the poor, and the damned are sent to die or sometimes, miraculously, to heal. The hospital is overflowing. Beds line the corridors. The air is thick with a mix of vinegar, sweat, and despair. You arrive before dawn. The sky a bruised purple dot inside. Chaos reigns. A chorus of coughs and moans fills the halls. Nurses move like shadows. dabbing at fevered brows, offering thin soups. Priests wander silently, clutching rosaries, muttering prayers for salvation. You're led to the plague ward. Here, the sick lie side by side, barely distinguishable from the piles of straw and broken pottery scattered on the floor. You move from bed to bed, checking pulse, temperature, the telltale buboes that have become all too familiar. One patient, a young woman, catches your eye. She is awake, her skin flushed, eyes wild with fear, but alive. You ask her name, Isabella. She whispers, she tells you of her village, miles away, where the plague crept in like a shadow. Her mother died first, then her father. She fled to the city, hoping for safety. You offer her wine infused with wormwood. She accepts but barely tastes. It mainstream fact. During plague outbreaks, many hospitals became places not of cure but of quarantine and observation. They often lacked trained staff and proper sanitation, yet were crucial in isolating patients from the wider community. You notice a small wooden charm hanging from her, neck across entwined with ivy, fringe tidbit. Some patients believed that ivy charms protected against evil spirits and illness. They were common gifts in times of plague, especially among women and children. As you tend to her, a commotion erupts down the corridor. A group of patients begin to shout. One man breaks, free from his bed, eyes wild, shrieking about black riders and death coming. The nurses rush to restrain him. You step in, calming the man with gentle words. He snaps back to silence, tears streaming down his face. You wonder how much of the plague is physical, and how much is the plague of the mind. Historians still argue whether the psychological impact of the plague fear, despair, madness contributed as much to death rates as the disease itself. You feel the truth in every anguished scream and every silent tear. The day stretches on. You move through the ward, offering what little comfort you can. Your wrist burns beneath the bandages. You ignore it for now. The wrist pain becomes a dull throb that you try to ignore, but it's always there, like a ticking clock counting down to something you don't want to admit. You patch your gloves again, this time with extra layers, hoping the barrier holds. Your daily rounds feel heavier now. The city's pulse is a slow, ragged gasp. Today you're summoned to a merchant's warehouse near the docks. It's been abandoned for weeks, but word is the rats have overrun it, and with them, the plague. You push open the heavy wooden door. The smell hits you first. Damp wood, decay, and the unmistakable tang of death. Inside, the floor is littered with discarded crates, broken barrels, and the occasional rat skeleton. You see a man lying on the floor near the back, pale and barely breathing. His clothes are soaked through with sweat. You kneel, using your staff to gently check his pulse. It's faint, but there. He opens one eye. "Help," he whispers. You nod and signal for help. They carry him to a bed outside under a makeshift canopy. You note his name, Thomas, a dock worker. Fringe tidbit. Some dock workers believed that the river carried not only goods, but also spirits, both protective and malevolent. Offerings of bread and salt were sometimes left on the docks to appease these unseen forces. Historians still debate whether river trade helped spread plague more than overland routes. The docks were melting pots of travelers, merchants, and diseases alike. Your wrist aches fiercely as you finish your notes. You glance down, one spot has spread, the other darkened. Panic rises, but you swallow it. You tell yourself, duty first, yourself later. Night falls heavy and thick. You retreat to your quarters, which now feel more like a tomb than a refuge. The candle burns low beside your dandelion, casting flickering shadows that dance like restless spirits. You try to rest, but your mind churns with images of the dying, the desperate, and the living who will soon join them. Your throat is raw. You cough, harsh and ragged, and the taste of vinegar lingers on your tongue. You realize that the plague is no longer just outside, it's inside you. Panic threatens. But you close your eyes and breathe deeply. You recall the old remedies, bombs, potions, prayers. None guaranteed to save you, but some might ease the passage. You mix a bitter tea from wormwood and sage. Sipping slowly, you spend the night wrestling with fear, hope, and the creeping certainty that this may be your final journey. Historians still argue whether self-care or isolation helped plague doctors survive longer. For you, it's the moments between sickness and duty that feel most fragile. Dawn breaks grey and cold. You wake shivering, sweat matting your hair. Your wrist is aflame. You unwrap the bandages gingerly. The spots have multiplied. Now there are 4, small but unmistakably black. Your heart pounds. You dress carefully, steeling yourself to face the day. Outside, the city seems quieter, almost eerily so. You make your way to a small chapel where plague victims are gathered for last rites. The priest greets you grimly. Together, you prepare bodies for burial, an unholy procession moving through empty streets. You see faces twisted by pain and fearsome, serene. Some screaming silently. You touch one forehead gently, then another. Your mask fogs with your own breath. Fringe. Tidbit: in some regions, plague doctors were called angel of death because they were both healers and heralds of final passage. You wonder which role you truly play. Historians still argue the psychological toll on plague doctors, and whether many succumbed to despair long before the disease claimed them. You wonder if you are next. Your strength wanes, but you continue. You visit the quarantine zone at the cities, Eger-Waldorf district, where the sick and suspected are sent to die or live in exile. Guards watch you carefully, but step aside. Inside, you find families torn apart, homes abandoned, and the smell of rot so thick it almost blinds you. You talk to a woman who is fevered but lucid. She tells you about her husband, who left days ago and never returned. You promise to look for him. You inspect the walls, noting holes where rats might slip through. You advise the guards on sealing the district tighter. Your body aches. Your wrist burns. You cough once more, harder. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a broken mirror. A pale ghost stares back. The end is near. You can feel it in every breath, every step. You know that the mask, the robes, the herbs, they are not enough, but you have done what few dared. You have been present where others fled. You have faced death and carried the weight of countless souls. Your last days are slow and foggy. Your mind drifts between memories, the merchant's wife, the boy in the hospice, Lady Evelyn's silent sleep. You whisper prayers you no longer believe, and yet there is a strange peace, a quiet acceptance. The plague will come for all of you eventually, but for tonight you rest. The candle beside the dandelion flickers low. Your eyes close. The world softens, and somewhere, far away, the city waits, waiting for the next doctor, the next mask, the next story. Now, as the weight of the story settles around you like a soft, worn blanket, remember that history is not just about dates and names, it's about people. People who lived, feared, hoped, and endured. The medieval plague doctor, with all his strange rituals and heavy burdens, was just one of them. Tonight, you've walked through shadowed streets, felt the sting of vinegar on raw skin, and heard the quiet breaths of those caught between life and death. You've seen courage where there was fear, kindness where there was despair. Breathe deeply now, let the world slow. The horrors fade, the night holds you gently. Sleep will come, soft and steady, like a river winding through forgotten places, and when you wake, you will carry a piece of this story with you, a whisper from the past, reminding you how far we've come and how human we truly are. Good night.